Great. It's good to see everybody here this week. We have a few different topics to cover. We're going to go through empathy mapping, personas, voice of the customer, and a little bit about how to build a super simple business case. So we'll just dive right in. Before we actually jump into the content for today, I just want to do a quick debrief from last week and, hear from everybody about any insights that they may have had from either the content we went through together last week or from the learning challenges that I shared with you. So I'll just start at the top of my screen, which is Antonio. Do you have any insights to share from last week?
I wasn't able to attend last week. I watched the videos though, so.
Okay, great. Well, if you have a chance to do the learning challenges or you'd like some assistance with that, please let me know.
Sure.
So then we have Rob.
Yes, hello. I was here last week. I didn't have a chance to do the homework, unfortunately, but we did do the exercise in class. Just appreciate that the various aspects of the strategy and whatnot. That's good. Thank you.
Okay, Jason.
I really like how we learned different strategies and how to accomplish your goals.
Okay. Janet.
Hi. Yes. My camera's a little weird. I guess for me, it's like being able to see things from like a bird's eye view or like an outside perspective, because when you're working at the company, you know your own things, but you kind of have to see it from somebody else.
That's great. And then taking that a step further, even having outside industry perspectives really can be really helpful, because your customers aren't only comparing you or evaluating you against your competitors, they're actually evaluating you against all other experiences they've ever had. So, having that outside perspective that's out of industry can also be very helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
Jonathan?
Yeah, last week I enjoyed last week a lot. Since then, I've had the opportunity to think more about what we've covered so far and trying to think about how it might apply here where I work. Because sometimes I guess a lot of the industries that people work in are very different, and so they don't necessarily fit that traditional model. So trying to figure out exactly how that might apply here and who are my customers even is interesting.
And you might have a challenge as well with the personas later today, thinking about the personas and the customer typing. But these are just great tools to have in your toolkit from, for right now or later on, and modify them. Like they're just kind of a guideline. I always like to think of it as it's a starting point to help organize your thoughts. And then you'd be like, oh, this doesn't apply, but if I did it this way, then it might be more relevant.
Yeah.
Sylvie?
All right. I really hate to admit it, but I didn't do my homework.
It's okay.
Fail.
No, I'm kidding.
All right, I'll leave. No, I'm just kidding. No, it was last week was really good. It was just nice to see an outside perspective. Basically, kind of like what Janet was saying. Like, I might have an idea of what our goals are, what our service are, but it's nice to see like how people can see it from the outside in instead of the inside out. So
great. I'll keep the I'll send you guys templates for everything. It'll be like in a PDF, so you would kind of have to print it off and be able to use it, but you'll be able to have these tools. I'll send those out at the end of the program so that you have access to all of them, so you can always come back to it later. Sylvie, don't feel bad. You have the emails that explain, and you'll also get the slides. So I'll just do it all at once so that I can package it all up as one big document for you. And then Catherine?
Yes, I'm just going to echo Janet and Sylvie. I really learned a lot in terms of looking at it in a different perspective than how we look at it from within our company. I also enjoyed the little thing that we did together in the class, which made me thought about all of the strategies and the tactics that we use. And I feel like that tool would be helpful moving forward for us.
Great. Thanks for sharing. Okay, so I'm going to just share my screen. Give me a second. You know, I'm so not very tech savvy here. It takes me a second to get everything going. Okay. So as I mentioned, we're going to go through empathy, empathy mapping, personas, voice of the customer, and then a little bit around ROI and CX business case. So I always like to include a section on empathy because fundamentally empathy is a great skill to have, whether you're in customer experience or you're a manager or a leader. It's just really, it's an important muscle to continue to build and to flex. So I like to talk about empathy. Really fundamentally, empathy is about being able to put yourself in the shoes of another person and being really aware or sensitive to what they're experiencing, what might be going on for them. And when you think about like your interactions with somebody, they're bringing everything with them, like a backpack full of everything that they've experienced that day or that week or that month. So it's not just those interactions. So being able to like put yourself in their shoes and think through what they've experienced, how they're feeling is very helpful. And I don't know if you had a chance to watch the video that I shared with you about empathy in healthcare. I thought it was a great little just kind of video to articulate that whole concept of we have so much else going on and we bring that all with us wherever we go, and to just be kind of mindful of that and try to put ourselves in the shoes of the people that we're interacting with. It's a great muscle to flex. And if you aren't good at empathy or you aren't really able to recognize other people's feelings, I have a couple of like really, they're kind of silly exercises, but I find watching reality TV or like a really dramatic show for like an hour or something, and then just like having a piece of paper beside you and just trying to articulate the emotions that they're feeling. And you'll see in like a reality TV show, especially, there's a ton of emotions are all over the place. I also have on my website a list of the feeling words, and they're more than like the 5 or 6 that come readily to mind. So printing that off and looking over those, if you want to get really kind of really concise on what the differences or the nuances between certain emotions, that can also be really helpful to help build those empathy skills. So there's a couple little exercises for if you feel like taking that away. And so just to carry on with that thought, it's super important to help you understand how to respond. Often people respond thinking about themselves and how it impacts them. But if you're listening to understand how they're feeling and what's going on, that's going to change how you respond. So thinking about what the other person needs in that situation, as opposed to what do you need out of that situation, help you build more meaningful connections. And by building that empathy skill, that empathy muscle, we'll better learn how to regulate ourselves and how to manage our own emotions in difficult situations, which beyond customer experience is a great skill to have as you continue to be a leader within your organizations. And it's something that I'm sure we could all probably work on a little bit. There's always room for improvement there, and understanding how we feel and then regulating ourselves and then adjusting to the people that we're interacting with. And so just another tool that can help you build that empathy muscle or that empathy skill and even improve relationships is an empathy map. It's very useful in a number of different situations. We're going to go through like a really simple template, which often I will use in relationships, or if I have an interaction that maybe didn't go how I had expected, or maybe I'm struggling in a relationship with a colleague or even personally with someone in my life. Drawing this out on a piece of paper and just spending a few minutes reflecting on the other person can really help you better understand them. So what you need to do with the empathy map here is you just identify, first of all, who you want to better understand. And so in today's exercise, I'll just ask you to identify a person in your life, personally or professionally, that you would maybe like to work on that relationship or try to understand them a little bit better from their perspective. And then you'll consider how they think, what they say, how they feel, and what they do. And maybe just put, three bullets in each sort of category. And if you're saying what they say, you could put quotes in there, like an exact sentence, what they say. And as you're doing that, if you have an aha moment and you can dive deeper and think about, okay, where is that coming from? Why do they suddenly always like jump into advice mode or fixer mode? If you have any insights about that, then you can put those insights in there as well. And then the final step would be just at the bottom, documenting a couple of key takeaways. How do you need to interact with them, or what could you do differently to better relate with that particular person, given what you've discovered through the empathy mapping process. And this is another version of the template. This is the version that exists in Mural. Is just kind of a default. It's a little bit more complicated. It has the pains and gains. But for today, we're just going to focus on this one. And I'm going to drop the link to the Mural in the chat here so we can all jump on over to Mural. Okay. Okay, so everybody should be able to jump in. And then I didn't put the names on this time, so just feel free to like jump in and claim a mural or a little template, whichever one you want. And then I will give everybody 7 minutes to do this exercise. I really want you to take the time to really reflect on this particular relationship and this particular person, so that at the end of the day, you have generated some insights and some key takeaways that will help you improve that particular relationship. I've just started the timer here for you. And if you have questions, just feel free to come off mute. And I stopped sharing, so hopefully everybody is able to still see their work by being directly in Mural. I forgot to mention, you can just put the picture, the name of the person, or if you had a picture or something of that person in the center to help you stay focused on that individual. That's what that circle is for.
A little confused on what we need to be doing with this exercise, sorry.
Okay, no problem, Jason. So we're each doing an empathy map where we're going to consider how one particular person that we interact with regularly, so like a named person, how they think, what do they say, what do they do, like how do they act, and how do they feel? And then reflecting on maybe what's behind that and how you could change your behavior or your interactions with them to improve that relationship.
And this would be just someone in her life, or a customer, or a employee, or
It could be
where should we select from?
it could be anybody in your life that you have a relationship with that you would, like to better understand them, understand their perspective better, and improve that relationship. So maybe you're having a difficult time with an employee of yours, or your boss, maybe. Yesterday when I did mine, with a colleague of mine who I was having a bit of a difficult time with from a relationship perspective, just not seeming to understand each other. So I took the time to do an empathy map to better understand them. And then what do I need to do differently to improve that relationship?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How can we say what they think? Is what we think they think?
Yeah, you're trying to, based on what you know about them, how do they think? What's their thinking process? Are they maybe quick to judge? Are they really analytical? Do they ask a lot of questions because they seek to understand? Maybe they're quick to jump to conclusions. If it's, about a particular field, like maybe they think they're knowledgeable and they aren't in a particular area.
Okay, thanks.
It does is like, what's their behavior? So sometimes there's a gap between what people say and what they do. Maybe they completely follow through on what they say they're going to do. Are they aggressive in their behavior? Are they meek, timid? Do they work hard? Do they, recognize people? I don't know. It depends on your situation in that particular person, but you're trying to get to the behaviors, what that does. And then how do they feel? Do they feel frustrated, overwhelmed, energetic, energized, outgoing, depressed, anxious? I'm going to give everybody another minute. In the last minute, you can either finish up building out your quadrant, or you can add in some key takeaways. So what is something you would maybe do differently? Or how would you modify your behavior, your interactions with them? Okay, I'm gonna share my screen and show you the one that I had put together. Oh, did I do that right? Hold on. There you go. So, over the last couple of months, I've been struggling with the relationship with one of my colleagues who's in a more senior level role than I am at the organization. And they have a lot of great, great corporate knowledge, great industry knowledge that, I've only been with them for just over a year, so I don't always have all of that. So I like to really collaborate and like work with people, pick their brains, and come to, something better, a better solution to a problem than I would have just on my own. So I'll often reach out to this person to collaborate. And I leave the discussions frustrated because what happens in those interactions is they automatically default to like they have to have the answer or they have to offer advice. And so we didn't have as much time in the one yesterday, so I didn't put quite as many little stickies in mine, but basically, yeah, they're defaulting to offering advice. Doesn't matter what it is I'm asking about. They're always like, I would do this. And for me, that, the dynamic that gets created is like, I'm not asking you what to do. I want to actually like discuss this and like, let's brainstorm and bounce ideas off of each other and come up with something better. Like, I'm not asking you to have the answer. But so what he does is he offers advice. And, over the last couple of months, I've come to realize that really what he's thinking about is like, do I respect him? Do I think he's smart? And he's trying to prove himself through that. And what he does is he often minimizes my feelings or my objections or my follow-on questions or my like, let's discuss that further, kind of minimizes everything I say and just constantly defaulting to, I would do this, I would do this. And part of it is, it seems like he's uncomfortable with emotion and doesn't really know how to respond. So if I use my feeling words, like I feel frustrated, then he just completely shuts down. So that's something for me to be, I think, more mindful of and more aware. And I think part of it is he's insecure and feels like sometimes I think he's irrelevant or maybe he's not needed. And so just getting a little bit more clear at the top of the call, say, I think for me, my takeaway is I need to be more clear with him and say, this is what I would like to do. I'd like to collaborate, bounce ideas off of you. I'm not looking for like you to have the answers. I respect your perspective and I want to, talk this through and to try to be a little bit more upfront with him. And maybe I need to be more patient and more understanding that this is maybe sometimes outside of his comfort zone. And so to maybe not get on my part to be more mindful and not get frustrated so quickly. So that's just one example of how you could use this. I remember when I was taking my design thinking training, and this is where I learned about this tool. This is a design thinking tool. The instructor said that she had taught this to her teenage daughter who was in high school to help her better understand her friends and her teachers when she was running into challenges or feeling frustrated after interactions with different people in her life. And she got to the point where this teenager would like break out a scrap piece of paper and just empathy map after every interaction, or being proactive. So if she wanted to ask for something, she would go ahead and empathy map to understand that person's perspective. And likewise, I've done that with some of my clients when I know I'm going to be approaching them with a big deal or something that is unexpected or something that I know is going to be a little bit of a difficult conversation. I'll sit down and I'll empathy map and put myself in their shoes. I'll think about what does success look like for them? What makes them successful in their role or in their personal life? What are going to be their objections? How are they going to feel about this? And I'll do that in advance of having that meeting. And if there's multiple people that I'm engaging with from the same client, I'll do it for each of them It doesn't take very long, but it really helps to get perspective and to position any sort of conversation, experience, discussion in a way that's going to be more well received. Any questions, comments, insights from anybody here? Do you think this is a tool that you would put into your toolkit and use? Few nods. Okay. Okay. So as I mentioned, there's like, you could take this a step further and you could add in the pains and the gains, which you'll often see pains and gains used in value proposition creation or product design, things like that. So you could even, depending on how you were planning to use this, you were using it more for experience design or product design. For your value proposition, you could add in the pains and gains. Generally, the difference between an empathy map and a persona is that I tend to go very specific with an empathy map, and I'll look at like one particular person with an empathy map, and then I'll use more of a persona if I'm looking at kind of a segment or a group of people. And in the persona that we're going to go through, the one of the templates that we have to review today, it does get into some of these more psychographic empathy type elements as well. The template's just a little bit different. So I already kind of talked a little bit about when you could use empathy maps or when you could use personas, but they can be helpful to help you decide on which segments to target, how to build a more compelling value proposition. They can actually help you to lower your cost to serve by really thinking about how you're delivering it. And often in experience design, by redesigning an experience and making it better for the customer, you're actually going to be saving costs, because it's often about ease and effort and streamlining it, and that generally reduces costs. So I think I mentioned on the last call, from a KPI perspective, cost reduction can also be a key KPI for CX initiatives. Empathy maps or personas can be used to help you with your client acquisition or your customer acquisition by targeting a particular segment, and by being more focused in marketing and ensuring that how you're interacting with them or how you're engaging is going to connect with that particular segment more. Can help you improve your product design by adding in features or benefits that are a particular value to that segment. So it helps you really get into how they're thinking and how they're going to use something, what's going on for them, what's most painful, what do they most need help with, what makes them successful. Help with customer retention as well as deepening those customer relationships. So moving on to personas. There are many different types of persona templates. I like doing this, what's called a pronto or a proto persona. It has a couple different names. And there's a couple other templates, but we're going to focus on the pronto persona, and we'll do this in Mural as well. Just can't see the template very well. It's a little bit fuzzy. I'll just bop over to Mural here and pull it up there so you guys can see it more clearly. Okay. Of course, it's taking a moment to load. Okay, so this persona, as I mentioned, is a little bit more generic. It is different than your typical marketing persona, because a marketing persona, not always, but generally, is looking more at the demographic components and looking at segmentation from a demographic perspective. But here we're trying to get at a little bit more like the heart of who the customer is. So you can give them a name and a sketch or a situation, a scenario, but then you start looking at their behaviors and actions, which is the part that we were looking at, like the do and the doing part, and then the demographics and psychographic details. In this template, they go together, but you could easily separate them, and you could put the demographics up with the name and sketch, and then look at the psychographic to like how they make decisions, what's important to them, what do they love, what do they hate about certain things. And then the needs and the pain points would be specific to your particular product or your service. And by building out a couple of these different personas, you'll see that there are differences between different segments. And you can then give them these names, these fancy little names. I know a lot of organizations like to come up with these quirky little alliteration names when they name their personas. I did this with a startup a couple of years ago, and how we created our personas was we used this exact template, but we had done a series of surveys as well as like one-on-one focus group calls, but they were one-on-one, so they were very personal. And then out of those, we created our personas. So we said this was for a product that would help parents enable their children to go back to school at the beginning of COVID. And so we had, different types of parents. We had a single parent type sketch, because we wanted to include things like maybe single income, where money was a bit more of a concern. We had included like psychographic elements in terms of, do they really care about COVID? Do they believe in COVID? Do they want to keep their kids home, or do they want their kids to go back to school? How important is safety? So we got, we really drilled into a number of those different elements. We created, I think, about 5 different personas, and we had a little sketch for each of them to help us identify which persona we would be targeting first when we first went to market. So for today, for the exercise, I wanted to bring this back to your business and to have each of you spend about 7 minutes, just based on what you know, build out who you think your organization's kind of ideal customer persona is. And if you have questions that you don't know, you could put those in there as well. I can drop the link into the chat. Okay.
And this would be an outside customer, correct? Or not internal?
If you wanted, you could do internal. Like if you are, if you provide, say, shared services within your organization and you're closest to an internal customer, then it could be internal. It's a little bit more difficult when you do it internal, because you're most likely going to be thinking about it from like one person. So an empathy map would be probably more relevant, unless you're providing shared services to, I don't know, say a contact. Maybe you're the manager of a contact center, I guess. I don't know. There's these different types of employees, but I'd find it a little bit more difficult to keep it generic if you're doing an internal customer. So thinking about probably your external customer would be easiest. And just generally speaking, you would do this as a group, and we'll walk through those steps after. But for today, just to help you get comfortable with the template and thinking about it from a generic perspective, looking at the behaviors and actions, the demographics and the psychographics, and the needs and the pain points. You'll just do it on your own, but I will kind of walk you through how you would facilitate something like this with a group. Okay, just about 1 more minute left. And then like with the other, with the empathy map, thinking about the key takeaways, what might be most important when you interact with them, or you design an experience for them, or you seek their feedback, whatever it might be, just thinking about the key takeaways. Okay. So in terms of how you would facilitate a session to complete an empathy map or to complete a persona, if you're using a design thinking approach, you would have everybody, use sticky notes to then put in the content for each of the quadrants, and everybody would contribute. I guess to the 3 quadrants, you probably would have decided together the scenarios, so like the name on the sketch, possibly. You could also do that as a group. So everybody would put down their sticky notes, their ideas, and then you would do what's called a playback. And so everybody would get a chance to share one of their sticky notes. And then, so if I shared an idea and then it was Ralph's turn, Ralph would share something different. You never duplicate the idea. And so the idea is that by the time you've gone through everybody, and maybe you have to do a couple of passes to get all of the ideas, is you've heard all of the ideas. And you can share an idea if it's similar but different. That could be a new idea and it could have a sticky note. So you might have some that are similar, but they're not identical. And then once you've done the playbacks, you do what's called a remix, where everybody gets up and they go, if you're doing this in person, they go to the wall, or if you're doing this on mural, they would just start moving the stickies around and you try to group them into common themes. And then you can rename the themes. And so then you'll go from, say, 30 sticky notes in each quadrant down to, maybe 10 different themes that really make up the kind of the foundational or the core components of each of those quadrants. You're using a design thinking approach for another tool. You would use the same steps that I've described, but then you can get to a voting. If you need to prioritize what's most important for whatever reason, then you can do voting where you can give everybody a certain number of votes and they can vote on what's most important or what's most relevant. So I did just pull up the design thinking book, which I did send out, I think, after the first week for you, which just provides the steps here for how you would do an empathy map if you were facilitating that. And you could do very similar steps for this persona as well. And you would have all these different sticky notes and then you would group them together. And that would give you your kind of your key components for each of the quadrants. If you haven't taken a look yet at the book, I highly recommend looking at the field guide, because there's like all of these different tools that you can use for any number of different challenges. And I really like using the prioritization grid to help prioritize when you have a lot of different ideas. So depending on what your role is, what your team's working on, tech teams, this is great when you're trying to prioritize workload, using some version of a prioritization grid. Anyways, this is like a tool. I have the book myself, but I use this all the time. And then I just kind of take something, I'm like, oh, it's not exactly what I'm looking for, but it's close enough. I'll just modify it to my needs and it helps me, solve different problems. So it's a great little tool. Okay. Does anybody want to share any thoughts or insights from this last exercise? Okay. Oh, I heard someone on mute.
I did. No, I was just gonna say, no, I think this is a good tool, especially once you have your persona made up, then it's good to do the next step and kind of just see what they're thinking and what they want. So I really like that.
Great. And that the template for this also exists directly in Mural. So you could just go in and grab the template instead of doing it the way I did it, which was having like 12 different versions of it. You could have a much larger version to do it as a group.
Nice.
Here's another little template that you could use. There, a lot of times, depending on what your needs, like I always think of like, what am I trying to achieve? And then making sure that I'm going to have the right heading in there and collect the right information. So I might not need the marketing messaging, but maybe I want to have, how do I need the experience to feel? And I would, change that and have a new section in this particular template. So this is just another version of a template. This is one that one of my clients did. This is actually at a university, and they were looking at their alumni and creating, I think they did about 10 or 12 personas to represent their alumni. Because as you can imagine, once you've graduated, it's say 22, and they're trying to map out who all of their personas are over like the next 40, 50, 60 years. They had a number of different personas, and this was the template that they chose. For them, they thought that, understanding the technology side of things was important. They also wanted to get into a little bit more of their fears. They thought that looking at what are they afraid of was an important piece for them. So a little bit different. So again, they modified it for their own purposes. And then they had a nice little summary. Whenever I scroll over it, it like hides the summary and I can never get it back. But they had a nice little summary at the bottom of the slide there so that they could just easily, see 2, 3, 4 different words as a trigger. And they had added some other things like what are the brands that they value and things like that. So that's another template. The idea is that you modify these to meet your purposes and you create them as a group, you embed collaboration. And then by doing it collaboratively, and when I say collaboratively, I don't just mean like within your like customer experience team, try to include people from across the business. Because likely if you're making any changes to the journey or the experience, you're going to need support from across the business, the different functional teams. And by having had them participate at the beginning, you'll have more buy-in throughout the rest of the process, depending what it is you need their help with or what you're going to do with this information. Okay.
I have a question about the personas. Just as like if you're using proto personas, a lot of times those are, I mean, you have an understanding of your business and the people who are in it, but it's mostly from your understanding of who they are rather than actual interviews in a lot of cases, right? And so I'm wondering what the value is of you making archetypes of proto personas as opposed to real interviews.
Oh, no, it would be based on like what you know about your customers. So you could have done a bunch of interviews. Like when I've done persona work, I've generally done interviews beforehand.
Mhm.
I've had some source of information that is providing the insights that I'm using to create the personas. Otherwise they're more aspirational. So I guess the question is, do you want them to be your aspirational persona or an actual persona, like who is currently our customer, who's currently buying, or this particular group of people are particularly dissatisfied or whatever it is. But usually it's based on information, but you bring people together. And if you've done interviews, and you could share the transcripts or the videos of the interviews, or if you have surveys, you could share all of that with the participants in advance and have them do the homework so that they come in informed to create the personas. So there's another, this is not exactly, I don't know if you call it a persona. And this is called customer typing. It's not widely used, but I think it's a really great approach to better understanding your customer. And then particularly for designing an experience. And what you're trying to do with customer typing is you really want to understand how they want to complete the intended transaction or how they want to interact with you. So you're diving into more of the behavior and how they do it and what is motivating them and driving them. And how you usually do this is through like observing the customer. So where I first learned about this concept was from Nicholas Webb, and he's written a book called What Customers Crave. It's a really good book. It's not written by like a kind of a CX professional. It's written by like an entrepreneur who's got their perspective on, you know, how you design businesses and products and services that people love. And so for him, in the example that he shares about customer typing, he was working with a client that was a car wash and came up with 4 different customer types, and then used those different customer types to then subsequently design the experience using this concept of stacking. So through his observations, he observed that there were these kind of 4 different customer types. The first one was sparkly, and what was like most important to them was having this clean car, and it was really tapping into the ego, to their ego. Speedy, it was about getting in and getting out, and it was like more transactional. They needed to have a clean car for a particular reason, but they wanted to get in and to get out. It was all about the time. Thrifty, it was about the price. So they wanted to have a clean car, but they were cost conscious. And then touching, it was actually about the physical experience of cleaning their own vehicle and having that connection with it. And you may not have thought that these were the standard customer types, or maybe they're obvious to you, but he did this, he identified these over spending a couple of days just sitting there and observing, just watching the customers come in and come out through this car wash. This is, I believe, in California, where they have different types of car washes than we have here in Winnipeg. It's a little bit of a different experience. And so once he identified these different types, the experience that he wanted to design was about creating a mobile solution. And so by creating a mobile solution, he was able to actually accommodate and serve all 4 of these different customer types. So for sparkly and feeding in their ego, being able to book in and come in weekly. You know, they wanted to have their car cleaned every Friday before the weekend when they're going out with friends or whatever. So having the mobile app allowed them to then book in. Speedy, the same thing, having a mobile app allowed them to have that time certainty. I have an appointment at this particular time. I can get in, get out. I don't have to wait. I don't have to wait in line. It's my turn. I can just drive up. I've got my appointment, I'm in and out. Thrifty, they were then actually able to leverage any valleys throughout the day when they had lower volumes and then discount those particular times, which then accommodated the price sensitive customer type who was really interested in getting a deal. And then the touching customer type, they were then able to book in for the do-it-yourself car wash where they actually got to take care of it themselves. And so one solution then accommodated all 4 customer types. And so that's where this concept of stacking comes in, where you don't always have to offer different solutions to accommodate all of these customer types. You can often identify one solution and just validate that it will work for all of those customer types. Or by adding a new element that meets the needs of one customer type, it will improve the experience for the others. So I love customer typing. If you have a certain type of business that you can go and observe your customers. You can also do this if you have an online business by leveraging screen recordings like Hotjar to watch your customers and watch how they go through that journey. And are Are they purpose driven where they've maybe come in just directly from a marketing campaign and they're not going to get distracted? You might be able to see what are they looking at. Maybe they're like really detail oriented. So they're going to scroll through. You're going to see them spending a lot of time on the reviews section. So you can also do this with online or digital businesses as well, as opposed to just like a physical business. Okay. Moving on to voice of the customer. So a true voice of the customer program is going to be omni-channel. It's going to consider all of the different channels where your customers are communicating with you. And I can tell you right now that it is more than just one survey once a year. So thinking about all of the different places where your customers are communicating and listening on all of those channels needs to be deliberate. It has to have a defined approach. It needs to be able to identify insights or trends, identify or develop the appropriate actions, assign them to a person or a team, and then track them through completion and report on the results. And it should also be closed loop. So whenever possible, getting back to the customer to let them know that you've addressed their concern, you've received their feedback, and this is what you've done in a more specific way as opposed to a generic. And so just a lot of organizations think that they have a voice of the customer program because they do an NPS survey once a year. NPS is only one channel, it's one point in time, and it may or may not actually be collecting a lot of feedback for you, depending on if you've gone beyond the standard NPS question and then have asked additional questions. So I always just like to say that it might seem obvious, but not everybody has gone beyond the NPS, and NPS is great if that's like where you're at and you just need to you only have one survey, but I challenge you to take it further and to be more frequent with it and to use different channels and different survey techniques. And so just like why omnichannel is so important is because different customer types, different personas will communicate differently. They will share different information depending on the channel. So if you think about a house and your relationship with your spouse or your partner, let's say you could only hear what they were saying when you were talking in the kitchen. So that's one of, say, maybe 6 other rooms in the house, the bathroom, the bedrooms, the dining room, the living room, the garage, where they could still be having conversations with you. They could still be communicating, but you're only hearing it in the one room. That's kind of what a single channel approach to the voice of the customer is you're only getting a fraction of what's being communicated, what's being shared, if you're only listening to 1 or 2 channels. So you really need to be, as much as possible, thinking about how you can monitor all of the different channels where your customers are communicating. And so just quickly as an exercise, I'm going to have you just take a blank piece of paper, if you have one, and just jot down a list of all of the different places where you think your customers are communicating with you. Just another 30 seconds. Okay. How many places do you each have on your lists for where your customers could be communicating with you? Does anybody have more than 5?
I have 5,
5?
but not more.
Anybody else? Okay, so for us in Gazelle, where I currently work, they communicate with us directly via chat, via email, which we monitor those. They communicate with us via the review site G2, but there's other review sites which we don't monitor, where they could be communicating with us on LinkedIn, which we don't have a kind of a really structured way of monitoring that. They could be communicating with peer groups because we sell into a really niche market where we sell into with economic developers. And so they're often connected with each other and they talk about their experiences with us and with other competitors. They're sharing information there and we don't really have a way at the moment to communicate with those groups or listen to those groups, connect with them. And then they'd also be connecting with or communicating with our competitors, you know, in a sales cycle, possibly on their review sites, if they're comparing their experience with us to others. And there's many other different social media channels, which we don't monitor. So like our Voice of the Customer program is definitely, you know, in its infancy and could certainly use some improvement. We do the occasional survey as well at different points in the customer journey, which has a pretty low kind of response rate. Does anybody want to share what they had documented for that?
I guess I could go. For ours, since we're on retail, we have like social media accounts that people like to comment. Reddit threads is a big one for us. Direct email address. We also have a call center that customers can kind of talk to us about anything, as well as like shopping through that. And then I think just the way that our website is, we have like a sort of like a CMS that tracks data. So I think like it's a backwards way of communicating, whether or not they're interacting with us or bouncing from the site, I think is a way of telling us at least something.
Great. And do you guys have like a way to kind of collate all of that great information, collate it into insights?
Not to the degree of comparing all of it, but that's kind of where my role comes in to just consolidate all of it. So eventually we will.
That's great. That's great. It's always, I like to think of these things as like kind of along a maturity curve and making incremental improvements. Trying to go from 0 to 100 with the Voice of the Customer program all in one fell swoop is pretty difficult. So thinking of just incrementally, what could we take on next to improve our Voice of the Customer program and make sure we're capturing more of those insights and then actioning them. Anybody else have anything to share?
I guess with the college, we have a lot like Reddit. I'm just guessing here, but because we have a lot of international students, there's probably a lot of action going on in international forums and blogs that we don't even see or know about. Facebook, LinkedIn, Discord, email, just in-person feedback to instructors or administrators, graduate surveys, and course evaluations.
Well, that's great. Yeah. I was working with a university a couple of years ago, and they used a social media analytics tool to capture the student voice. And so they had programmed it to look at, you know, certain words and to assess the sentiment so that they could go exactly like hear from the students where they were. And then they would have like a weekly report, which would identify any insights, what was happening. And during that time, they had a new president come on, they had a strike. I think there were some other controversial elements. And so they leveraged that social media analytics platform to really understand the student voice at the time. Okay. So just a quick little story about how Nike first got their Voice of the Customer program up and running. Now, wasn't my example. It's actually been told to me by the person, Christopher Stark, who started Nike's Voice of the Customer program. And when they first started it, they had a very small team. I think they just had kind of 2 people on their team. And part of their strategy was to get these quick wins and to get some champions within the business who would then, promote the Voice of the Customer program and in turn, like create more demand for it. And so one of the very first ones that they did was they went seeking a particular insight from a product. So they went reading the different reviews to find like an actionable insight. And so they found with running shorts that one of the most important things that a customer is looking for is the size of the pockets. Now, I don't know anything about running shorts. I'm not a runner. So for me, I was like, oh, really? That's really insightful. And for them, it was too. They had no idea that pocket size was so important, but they identified this through reading all of the different reviews and the questions, comments that were being posted. So that's something that's pretty easy. So they identified the insight. Customers want more information about pockets, pocket size. And so then the action, they went to the product team and they went to the marketing team. The marketing team started taking more pictures of the shorts to put on the website. So then they added more pictures to the website with the pictures of the pockets. And then in the description, they would actually describe the pockets. And what they had done is they had taken a measurement point before they made any of these changes and then after. And they were able to demonstrate a market improvement in the conversion rate of when people were going to look at the shorts and then were they putting them into their cart and then finally were they buying them. So they had taken the measurement pre and post. And then they created this little internal newsletter where they would celebrate these wins. So this was one of their first ones. So it didn't take very long for there to become this momentum within the organization for the Voice of the Customer program, where suddenly the different teams were coming to them, asking them to find insights and information about their area of responsibility so that they could then improve the results. And I always thought that was such a great example of just how something that's really simple, but by following a deliberate set of steps and including the measurement piece could really help amplify a Voice of the Customer program in a business. So what they would do, and just like in 3 quick little steps, was their team was responsible for understanding what was happening, analyzing it, identifying the action, and then curating the rest of the process. So they would curate and manage the rest of the process. So of course, they wouldn't be the ones that would actually make the fix or make the improvement, but they would track it. They would make sure it was delivered, and then they would report on it. So we already did this one. So we'll move on to the business case. How many of you have experience submitting business cases? Often in a lot of organizations, they might be like really, really lengthy documents. Like I've seen some where they can get up to like 20 pages. But essentially what a business case is it's asking you to document what you're planning to do. Why are you recommending that approach? What is it going to cost? And what's the financial benefit? And a lot of CX initiatives were initially getting funded, but then kind of defunded over the last 3 to 5 years or so because they hadn't been able to demonstrate an ROI. And part of that was because they weren't really put together with a really strong business case. They had the, what do you plan to do? What are you recommending? And what is the cost going to be? But many organizations were still immature and they weren't putting down what the financial benefit was going to be, or maybe they did, but then they weren't reporting on it. And so I just wanted to add this in to help any of you who might be seeking funding or investment for either a CX initiative or any other initiative to consider the business case. And even if you aren't asked for one, to just put these 4 items forward and then continue to update your colleagues or your stakeholders, particularly on the financial benefit. So CX has often been criticized for being kind of really loosey-goosey on the metric side of things and having it be really difficult to demonstrate that financial benefit. So get creative, make some assumptions and state your assumptions, but I challenge you to always try to tie it back to some sort of financial benefit. So an improvement in this particular area is going to result in more sales, or it's going to improve our renewal rates or decrease our churn, which will then have a financial benefit of X. And state your assumptions. You can say, if you don't have the measurements in place, to say every client that we lose costs us $20,000, you can state your assumptions based on the information that you do have available, and just try to always tie it back to some sort of financial benefit, some sort of financial metric, whether it's cost savings, top line growth, improved total customer value, whatever it might be. Try to add on a financial metric. And I have a chapter that I'll send out for you that if you want to dive even further, there's a little bit of a chapter on this from a customer experience book called Customer Experience 2. Very simple, very straightforward, where it explains this concept a little bit further. And this simple business case is actually modeled after the Forrester 4-sentence business case. So it really doesn't need to be more complicated than that. And then just always remember to continue reporting on it, even if you aren't asked to make sure you track the before and the after and to report the results as you're going through it. Here's just a little template for you, where you could like use it as a scratch pad or use it to present, doesn't matter. I like to just use it as a scratch pad as I'm trying to think through my thoughts on what are you planning to do, what are you wanting to improve at a cost of, and what is the financial benefit. So business case on a page. Okay. So just as we wrap up, if you would like to complete this week's learning challenges, that would be fantastic. I would challenge you to try to build out a series of 3 to 5 customer types, like I showed you with that car wash example. Spend 5 to 7 minutes reflecting on what you've learned, how it applies to you in your role. And taking it a step further, challenge you to interview 1 to 2 customers to just better understand their perspective, seek areas of opportunity, and then share the insights with your team or with others within your organization. So if you have these insights and you aren't sharing them, then you aren't helping move the business forward. So try to share the insights that you have about your customers with others within your organization. Any final questions before we wrap up for the day? Okay, 1 word close. I will start with, well, Jonathan's showing up on my screen first, so go Jonathan.
Challenged.
Okay, great. And I have Catherine.
Insightful.
Man. I know you joined us nearly at the end, but
Omnichannel.
omnichannel. Sylvie?
I was going to use challenge, but it got
That's
used.
okay.
I don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
Interestingly challenging. There you go. It's 2 words. I'm sorry.
No, we're not that strict here. Antonio?
I'm still trying to assimilate. It's new for me.
That's okay. We're all at different points in our journey. Ralph?
Just getting an idea for, empathizing with things more and finding, I guess, with emphasizing, finding out where the weak points in some of your systems might be.
Jason?
I would go with challenging also. There's a lot of stuff in here that I've never really thought of before. Even if I have spent the last 2 months building up a business case and going through all those steps, but some of the other parts is completely new.
Great. Janet?
I'd say educational.
And Jared, I think, is the last one.
Excuse me, engaged.
Engaged. Excellent. So don't forget, you all have a coaching session with me. And if you wanted me to review something in advance, any documents that you've maybe put together or a strategy that you have or personas or whatever it is, you can send me homework and I will do homework before I meet with you. Just maybe give me a day in advance, but you can send me homework and I will do that to be as prepared as possible. So yeah, feel free to book in. And if you don't see a time that works for you, just send me a note and we'll figure something out. I really love those. And that's an opportunity for you to, get really granular or focused on your business and your particular challenge. And I'm more than happy to help in any way I can. Okay, so we will see you all hopefully next week in person. I see Man just raised his hand, so I'll just.
Yes. Just a question on that consultant with you there. Would it be okay to invite my team to go through that with you, or just like
Yeah,
for the
sure.
participant only?
No, that's fine.
Oh, okay. That's
If
a
you want to
bonus.
have someone else participate, that's okay.
All right. Thank you. We'll follow up on that.
Okay, so I hope I'm going to see you all there next week. I'm looking forward to it. We haven't been able to have many in-person sessions in the last couple of years. And if there's anything you'd like me to go into further there, let me know, send me a note in advance. And otherwise, I will see you all next week.
Cool. Thank you. Bye.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone. Stay
everyone.
safe.
Hope to see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care.